You're listening to Remotely One, a podcast that educates, entertains, and inspires you to take your life back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a former beer rep who left the warehouse to become a voice actor and digital creator.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds awesome. Let's clock in.
Hi, guys.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. By the way, I have a headset that I can switch to, but I frequently do these podcasts with just the Yeti mic.
Yeah, as long as there's no echo on our end, you should be good.
Do you hear anything?
No, I don't hear anything. No? I think you sound great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, don't get overwhelmed. But it's there.
We are known for not getting overwhelmed.
Don't get overwhelmed by my beauty. I get you.
No, you are. I'll tell you, got the best smile on LinkedIn.
Oh, here we go.
How does he do that? Because we sort of have the same thing. Mine doesn't come through. I don't know why. It must be older teeth.
You're gonna make me put that slow music on.
Oh boy,
that's good, baby. We're gonna slow dance.
Welcome back, everybody, to Remotely One. I am your co-host, Rick Haney, joined by my esteemed colleague, Kaleem Clarkson. What's shaking, brother? Look at you all dancing over there.
Oh, pointing to myself. I'm feeling good, baby. How you doing, baby? You looking good.
I'm pumped up. We've been laughing so much already on this show. Today's going to be, it's what we like to call, folks, a real doozy. That's what the show is.
A doozy.
A wicked doozy, as they say up north. Yeah.
100%, dude. 100%.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody, since you know us, you know how to find us now, do us a huge favor and go to ratethispodcast.com/remotely one and just leave us a review. That's all we ask. Not a big deal. Not a huge time commitment. If you could do that for us, we would be ever so grateful. Since 2015, Remotely One is one of the largest communities of remote work professionals with over 3,500 Slack members and 5,000 email subscribers. Really? Man, we are going places. It is free to join. Go check it out at remotelyone.com. And with that out of the way, Kaleem, my brother from another mother.
Yes, sir.
Give us a tease or two about today's guest.
Ooh, sweet Mickey. Let me tell you about our guest today, man. Our guests, they are originally from Buffalo, New York. So they know about that snow, son.
Don't we all?
Yes, we do. But they currently reside in Cincinnati, Ohio. Let's see what else we got here for our guests. Our guests today, they hold an MBA in finance and a BS in psychology. So they're up in their mind. They can tell you how you're feeling, but they also
a lot of thinking going on.
Numbers. They can also crunch numbers.
Nice.
Let's see. Our guests, they are a corporate commercial real estate professional. They built a startup earlier in their career that was acquired by CBRE, just a little real estate company. CBRE, just a tiny
I may have heard of them.
Company.
Let's
see. They've held various leadership roles at different real estate companies, such as Newmark Group, another company, it's tiny, a consulting company called Accenture. No big deal.
Goodness gracious.
No big deal. Rick, what are we doing? That's the question. What do we do?
Not enough.
Not enough. Let's see. What else about our guests? There's just so much good shit about our guests. Some things most people don't know about our guests. They once almost sunk, a 450-foot long lake freighter. You kidding me? And that shit moved cement, Rick. It was a cement lake freighter that almost sunk.
That ain't coming back up if you let it go.
No. It's down.
Not coming back up for breakfast.
Yep. And Rick, this is we definitely got to learn more about this. Something a lot of people don't know about our guests. Something else is that our guests, they had to save money for college, Rick. They had to pay for college, and they spent a summer as a hooker, Rick. A hooker.
Okay. A little unorthodox, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Let's see. Our guest today, they are a thought leader in the emerging world of distributing work. That's where we connected. transformation of work in the workplace. And he's just always published in all of these different places and how corporate real estate and the office kind of build that environment, right? Our guest today now serves as the managing principal of Mortevita, an integrator of workplace, real estate, and technology that services commercial clients.
Okay.
Listeners and viewers, please give a warm welcome to Francis Saele.
Kaleem, did you go to the Oprah School of Introductions or what?
Oh, yeah.
Let me calm down. Calm down, studio audience. Shut up!
Hey, studio audience. We got a job to do here, people.
Ooh. Thank you, Francis. Fran.
Kaleem, I have to tell you, I checked and I have my mouse in my pocket. So when you referred to me as we and they and all, my pronouns are right. So
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Well, we can't give away who our guest is. You know what I mean?
The edification is like the whole thing here, right?
Absolutely.
We want to make sure you are pumped up, and we hope you are.
Really appreciate you, man. I connecting with you on LinkedIn. I feel like I've known you for 20 years. You post a lot of great content, man, and I just appreciate you joining us on the show, man.
As do I.
yeah, well, thank you both. Great to be here, and I've always enjoyed this show. I think it's kind of a fun place to go when you need to improve your attitude. You want to get up, you tune in here.
Oh, thank you so much.
There it is, Rick. That's what we're
There
trying
it
to
is.
do. We're
That was
telling
the bolster
stories
of the
remote
century.
work. And if you need to lighten up your day, you start this show. If you're sitting there working remotely or hybrid or wherever, you can start your day off with a couple of dudes from Maine.
Yeah. Eat that, Kathy Lee and Hoda. We're coming for y'all. And most importantly,
Yes.
I gotta know, what was it like being a hooker?
Oh, you want to start with the hooker? Well, I know that sounds bad, but there is hope for hookers, and actually, hookers are paid pretty well, even in the old days when I had to do this. But actually, this was not the hooker that everybody's thinking about, unfortunately. And I have the job description somewhere I can bring it out. But this was a summer job that I was able to get at Republic Steel, just south of Buffalo, New York. Okay. And I used to take a bus every day down there to go to and it was a midnight shift. We worked 6 days a week, midnight to 8. And it was actually a bar mill. They created bars of steel. And then they take the bars and they wrap them up and they would put them in a storage area until they were shipped. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how did the steel get from the storage bins, which were huge, loaded with different kinds of steel and different customers? They were all sold, waiting to be shipped.
Okay.
They would send out a technician who had one assistant. So there were, about 5 or 6 teams like this. And we went out in these, steel barns. We found the steel. Usually it wasn't where it was supposed to be. You had to find it. And then you had to lift the steel up those were overhead cranes, right?
Okay.
And the primary guy would put the first side on and they would lift it up. So this is, tons of steel hanging up like this with other things right around it. And then my job was to reach underneath this bundle of bars with a long hook
with potential death
chain, and then
put
the chain on this side.
It's the hook.
That's what it is. That's right.
So you were called the hooker because you had to hook the steel.
That's exactly right.
Oh, there it is, baby.
Well, don't I feel like a horse's patoot?
I was in the union. I had all the union protections, with all that stuff. But I'll tell you, a couple times, more than once, I'd say 4 or 5 times, the guy put the bars up, and I would go in there with my hook, and all of a sudden something slipped off, and, boom. So if you were too far under the bars, you could lose a lot.
Oh, my goodness.
It was a great job.
It was a great job.
It cost me an arm and a leg, but it was a great job.
There's a lot of relaxation on the midnight shift. We started at maybe 12:30, did 1 or 2 loads, and we came back. It was time for lunch, So what do you eat at 4 in the morning?
Yeah.
And then you would go back and maybe do one other load, then wait for the sun to come up. So it wasn't really that intense. But when you got out there, you had to really be awake.
Yes, you did. You sure did. So take that, Richard Gere. Okay. Take that, Julia Roberts.
You're not the heroes you think you are.
You're not saving our guest today, Richard Gere. Okay.
No, sir.
He was lifting steel, son.
All that aside, thank you for sporting our juvenile sense of humor.
I mean, everyone was thinking it. Everyone was
Right,
thinking
right.
it, so we had to get it out of the way.
Of
Okay.
course, of course, of course. You know, we know that was a long time ago, and you've had a host of professional experiences
Just a few.
since then.
Just a few.
And obviously, these times we're in, everybody knows the pandemic changed the entire work landscape. But more specifically, the emergence of distributed work has had a dramatic effect on physical office space. Can you talk to us about some of those challenges and how they're being addressed?
Well, that's a great question, actually. And, you know, when people talk about workplace, maybe just get into it with this comment. The workplace, when you thought about workplace before 2020, and this was a corporate services function that everybody in real estate knew about, basically what workplace management was, decide how big a space you needed for whatever the team was. And as that lease came up for renewal, they would figure out maybe how many more people they expect to add over the next 3-5 years. Add that all up and then say, okay, instead of 80 people, we need a space for 120 people. Go out and find a space. And you go out and find a space and you lay it out, and that's it. But that's it. That was all workplace was. Okay. Workplace has become much, much more complicated. And that's not, although that function still exists, it's a very late decision as to where you go exactly in terms of an office environment. But to your question, I think clearly the office has changed quite a bit in terms of what it does. And frankly, I think there is no single answer yet. I don't think there's no definitive answer. And there may never be. You know, the office is designed to do this. My sense is that for different organizations, the office does different things, but other things are gone elsewhere. They've gone into the distributed environment. They've gone to homes. They've gone to third places. They've gone to other, you know, co-working places. It's really an evolution that is extraordinary. And I'm looking forward to somebody writing a really good book about this. I'm sure there'll be several. Okay. But to your question, what happens to the real estate that exists? This is a kind of a problem for, certainly it's a problem for most landlords, but it's also a problem for the occupiers whose people are now not there all that much. You know, most organizations are operating on some type of hybrid schedule where they may be in the office 2.5, 3 days a week, maybe not. Some of that's enforced, some of it isn't. So you don't really need as much space as you had before. That's one thing. The second thing is that when you are asked to come into an office, what do you do there? You know, I mean, you see a lot of complaints about people who spend an hour and a half taking a train into an office to sit there on a Zoom call that they could have done, you know, from their next room in their home. So there are all kinds of things like that going on, which suggest that the role of the office and where the office is or should be are changing. And I think that's a couple of the big things that are happening in my mind about legacy office real estate is that historically, most of it was centered in a downtown area. Yes, there was suburban nodes, but still, you know, the biggest node was downtown. The downtown area, while central in a community, is likely to be the farthest away from most people who tend to live remotely. So over time, my sense is that as the office requirement, whatever that is, grows, it's probably not going to grow where the existing legacy stock of office exists now. I think we'll see office emerging in places that are certainly closer to where employees are. It's the Adam Newman concept of flow, where, you know, you would have where you go to collaborate with people in person, fairly close to where you live and where you shop and where you go to the show or whatever. So these nodes are going to emerge. I'd like to call them central living districts. The central business district is really up in the air in terms of what's going to happen there. I mean, there's a sense of more people moving in, conversions of office to residential, other uses. But those are very difficult to pull off, and they're expensive. And we've seen some of that, but it's not going to be an opportunity for everybody.
Fran, let me ask you. So you start your career. I'm just kind of curious.
Okay. I am too.
You know, you transition.
How did I wind up here? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of start off your career and you build a great startup and it gets acquired by CBRE and you start working for them and you're finding spaces kind of like what you explained for companies, right? And you're doing that, but then all of a sudden pandemic happens And probably even a little bit before the pandemic, you were probably starting to see a little bit of a shift towards some flexibility from even some of the tech sector and some other sectors. But how did you, as a commercial real estate professional, how did you embrace this idea of remote work and workplace flexibility when it's obviously impacting your career and your pocket specifically? Like how and why do you feel this need or this desire to talk about workplace flexibility as a person who manages these spaces or helps people find
it's
these
an interesting
spaces?
question. I will tell you, at the time this happened, I was working in Dallas and lived in Dallas for 2-3 years. We had a team in Dallas, a U.S. team in Dallas and a team in Pittsburgh. But then about half of the people we work with were overseas. We outsourced a great deal of processing work to the Philippines and India. And what happened, it was an interesting evolution of thinking, because when I started the job, everybody came to the office all the time. But if you live in Dallas, I don't know how familiar you are with Dallas traffic, but we had a lot of people that were driving an hour, hour and a half, some even more than that, each way every morning on the highways in and around where we were, which was on the Dallas North Freeway, if you know the city. And the first event that happened, actually, I think there were 1 or 2 people who came in and said, we have a problem. We like working here and everything, but our competitor had offered to let them do the same job from home because they could do all the work from home on a computer.
What year is this, Fran, roughly? Just like,
this is, let's see, 2017.
Wow. So like before, this is not.
Oh, this is, way before the pandemic.
Wow. Okay.
And we said, well, we would be okay with maybe you staying working from home 1 day a week. It's the same evolution. It just happened earlier. 1 day a week or 2 days a week. So this was negotiation going on with individual employees. And then the employees start talking amongst each other. Say, hey, who's this guy? And so we lost that person. Really good. And about a month later, another person came in and said the same thing. And I think it was a different competitor, because there were a lot of competitors in Dallas. It's a big MSA.
So competition is offering, so just to clarify, competition is offering remote and flexibility, and people are leaving your company.
Right. Because, it's not traditional. I mean, Newmark is a great company, by the way. This is I don't want to talk too much about the company, but they're very traditional New York, and they're, really polished professionals there. And so the mindset of the company is, well, every place you go, it's suit and tie and everything, and you have to be together. And the idea of working remotely was foreign at the time, frankly. And actually, for computers, they would buy desktops. So you couldn't take them home. You had to come to the office to do your work, right? Okay. Wow. It's a corporate strategy at the time. And again, that's not a put down of the company, but we did have people on some notebooks. And those are the people who became vulnerable, because they could just, if you didn't need if you had a notebook, you could do it, but why couldn't I do it? Because someone in New York said no. So after the second person left, we decided, well, maybe we should experiment with this ourselves. And so we had a team that figured out a strategy, because a lot of the work actually was being done in the area, in Asia. So it didn't really make any difference where you were when you had that communication with them. But anyway, so we decided basically that we would take, most of the staff, including the management staff, and allow them to work from home. So I remember when I left in 2020, because I was in Dallas in March of 2020. If you remember, the messages were coming out, get out because there won't be any flights available after Friday. It's one of those messages. By that time in the pandemic, we only had 2 or 3 people that came in on a regular basis. One to open the mail, basically, and another one who lived fairly close. Everybody else was working from home. So we got through that. But then we tried to figure out new ways to operate with our people who weren't there all the time. We would have a monthly get together. It would be a lunch and learn, or it would be some type of meeting, or we would create teams to get together periodically. So we were able to stay in touch, and we sort of had primordial, distributed work ideas, which since have matured quite a bit. But so when the pandemic hit, it was pretty easy. By that time, everybody was in notebooks. Hey guys, everybody go home. And it was, everybody said fine. So that's how I got, I don't know if they answered your question, Kaleem, or not. Probably spent too much time on that. But at that point, I figured out that what I had been doing for the last 20 years was interesting and important and everything. But the interesting part of real estate and workplace was just beginning. And I wanted to be involved in that full time.
Yeah. So obviously, lately, the sizzle term has been return to office, right?
Right.
A lot of these corporations are literally forcing people back to work, to the physical office space.
Well, they're trying.
Yeah. And we also hear a lot about hospitality and offices needing to improve on their, operational hospitality. What are your thoughts about that conversation and the concept overall?
Well, I think what's happening now is you start out in a binary fashion and you wind
Mhm.
up with something in the middle. It used
Mm.
to be you're in the office or you're at home. Okay.
Right. That was hybrid before the pandemic. Hybrid was somebody in the office Monday through Friday, working in the office, and then another subset of people that were fully remote. You're absolutely
Right.
right. Like
Yeah.
that was
So,
that was
so,
hybrid.
but that's now morphed into something very different. And,
Mm.
for a lot of reasons, occupiers, tenants are very hesitant now to make big commitments. As a matter of fact, when lease space that we just had this data came out a couple weeks ago from CoStar, of the leases that had renewed in 2024, okay,
Okay.
more than half a year, there was a reduction in space, total space leased by those tenants in their new space or wherever they were in a renewal. It
Right.
went down by 17%. Now, 17% of the entire legacy
That's
market
significant.
is about
Mm.
just under 1 billion square feet.
My
So
God.
all of a sudden, kind of overnight, people are leasing, a
A billion square feet less.
considerably smaller amount of space.
Right.
That kind of makes sense if you don't really know what's going to happen next. You don't want to make long-term commitments. So there's a pressure on to make the commitments shorter. And when you make the commitments shorter, it becomes much more difficult to finance those from the ownership side, the
Oh
landlord
my
side.
goodness. Oh my
So
goodness.
how does this work? And you now have the co-working firms and the flex firms stepping in. And they started out with, one approach to how they financed it. Now they're becoming much more flexible and they're forming partnerships with landlords to help, spread the risk and spread the return. So there's an evolution there. Those spaces, I suspect there's going to be a lot more of those because it's better to the tenants what the tenants really want. And when you're doing that, you can also create the additional spaces of service elements that an organization might want. And those can be discrete by occupier. So there's a lot of changes going on in the office world as to what's being done in the offices, how they're being serviced, what you get when you go to the office, and what you get if you don't go to the office. So there's thousands of things that we could talk about there.
So when you talk about hospitality, where do you to me, I feel kind of torn when I hear about this concept because it's like we understand that employers want employees to go back into the office. And then obviously the landlords, the owners of the buildings want more people in there. But it seems to me just spending a lot of money on things to try to lure people in seems kind of counterproductive and really I feel like kind of short-sighted because it's like, well, that's going to be great for a little while, kind of like the honeymoon period. Like it's great for a little while, but what happens when that wears off? So like, why has there been so much talk about hospitality and treating it more like a hotel? Like, why is there a ton of talk like that, you think?
Well, I think because that's what occupiers really want. They want to be able to figure out a way to reduce their commitments, but at the same time, improve the environment for their people so they'll come in. I mean, occupiers still, this is still dominated by boomer types like me who, have grown up in that environment as opposed to Gen Z. You don't have any Gen Z presidents yet. So the mindset is to do things the way they had been done. I think it'll get better with Gen X, and certainly when millennials take over, you'll see a lot more creativity in how this is done. But I mean, the commute is the thing that really throws everything under the bus because the average cost of the commute somewhere around $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month, and in some cases a lot more, some cases less. But if you're telling an employee out of after-tax money to spend $12,000 a year to come to this office, when I could be doing the same thing at in my spare bedroom, you got to have a rationale as to what's going to be attractive to get them back, other than being employed. Depending on where the market is for employment, having amenities and food and entertainment is helpful, but it doesn't overcome the commute and the cost, frankly, in most cases. Plus, you have the flexibility that many single moms or married, if you have children, or if you have adults, parents and relatives who are need some care, you got to be much more flexible. So I mean, that's where we find most organizations that are moving in that direction are progressive, and they're coming up with ways to make that work for their organizations. It also obviously works for the employees, And there tends to be a lot more loyalty. Employee retention is higher, and recruiting is much, much easier if you have a flexible work environment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all think remote is great, but often the downside is connection, right?
Right.
How do you think? Yeah, I know you agree, Kaleem. How do you think these office spaces will be transformed to satisfy that often lack of connection with people?
Well, I think, the office still carries the burden of the in-person collaboration on whatever.
Sure does.
Okay.
It does.
And it's there, and that's a logical role for the office. But we know the collaboration ranges from anywhere from 10% to 30%, maybe a little more of people's general work activity. So you've got 70% or more that you would rather be doing someplace where you didn't have a lot of interruptions, and where the facilities would be different if that's what you were doing. So it's a challenging question, I think, for occupiers, a challenging question certainly for anybody in real estate. And the same thing with if you're developing a strategy, how does that fit? How do you make it fit, and how does it change over time? I mean, even since the pandemic, so in 4 years, things have changed a lot.
Right.
And we can only imagine what's going to happen between now and the end of the decade. But what we do see is that the amount of real estate that's now being required, being demanded by the users, is shrinking, and it's getting much more flexible. The days of 15-year leases are kind of over. Okay. And if you look at the stats, if you look at the national stats on rollovers of leases, and you plug in at the beginning of 2020, the number of leases that had 50,000 square feet or bigger, those on average had a remaining term of about 11 years. And that represents nationally about 300 to 350 million square feet of space.
Okay.
But those spaces are going to be rolling over the next 5-6 years.
Oh my gosh. You mean those leases are up?
Yeah. And the CFO is going to say, hallelujah. I just saved $15 million on that space. That'll happen. That will happen. And that's aside from any other shock, any other economic situation, collapse in the stock market, major recession, war, any of those things could happen. And those would also have impact as well. But
you mentioned, economic, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You mentioned economic impact. And what are your thoughts on some of the more creative, like repurposing of some of these corporate spaces? I mean, are we going to be at a point where we're looking at, boutiques and Airbnbs that have been repurposed from corporate environments, or, what are your thoughts on some of those?
Well, I think to a large extent in the legacy office environment, I said this maybe a year or so ago, if I was 20 years younger, I would become a demolition contractor, because I think you're going to make a lot of money in the demolition business over the next 10 to 15 years. I think a large share of the legacy office stock is basically, it's not only functionally obsolete, but its use is totally evaporated. Keep in mind, when these buildings were built, every
60s,
building that
70s
now
maybe?
exists basically was designed, even the new ones, but even they're better, and they're better environmentally, et cetera. They were all designed under the concept that everybody gets together in one place. It was big, it was deep cores, it was a totally different use.
Tons of offices, tons of cubicle space.
Right. So you have big floor plates, which, as an occupier, when that was in vogue, was very helpful. You could do a lot of interesting things there. But today, those buildings don't convert well to condos or apartments.
Right.
No, it's
easier to just knock them down.
You can't use. What can you do in there? Well, you can do vertical farming, or you can do the blind association, or you can do other people who don't really care about looking outside. And there are people who, don't want to look outside, but most people do. So it's a problem.
Right.
And you can fix them, but the cost.
Most people do want to look outside.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, they have these new technology so helpful, because they make these exterior windows that are actually TVs, and they fit on the wall, and they look like a window. And you actually have a camera on the outside, so
I've seen them.
Exactly what you would see if that was a window, but it's a wall.
It's a wall. Yeah, it's a camera. It's a camera on the outside of the building. It's sick. It's
right.
crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
So, I mean, you could do that on a boat. That would be a good thing for an inside cabin, when you can't have a wall there with a picture of the outside.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Fran. I think I agree with what you're saying. A lot of these buildings, and I think downtown's a part of this association where they talk about city planning and the future of how to get traffic in and out of the city, and whether they should use, public transportation, rideshare, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And green space downtowns are the new it. Pittsburgh has a really new downtown project that they did, and it's all about walkability and connectivity. So I'm right there with you. I could see people knocking down skyscrapers that were built in the 50s and 60s and having, new green space, and some of these new mixed use spaces that people are developing and designing are absolutely amazing, with restaurants, co-working spaces. I mean,
they're great. And you can do that in an existing structure, but it's more complicated, and it makes it much more expensive. So we won't see as much of that as some people would like to see. I mean, everybody would like to see a way out, but I think for this, it reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a video done by Mercedes called The Journey That Changed Everything. And it's on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, it's the story of Bertha Benz, who was the wife of the guy who started Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
And it's a story about, and this is a true story, about how in 1883 or something like that, they had a prototype, the first car. And she was so hyped up on the car, she decided she was going to go to meet her parents, who were about 180 kilometers away. And she took the car with two of her children and started driving. And you just have to watch the video. It's Bertha Benz, The Journey That Changed Everything. Because that's, I think, where we are with office buildings. We think about work. When we say we're going to do work, or you're going to go to the office, because the office was the heart of work. That's where everything emanated from. And that's been the case for, 100 years. But 100 years ago, it was a paper environment. Today, there's no paper in any office anymore. Really, you have maybe a trash can for little note papers. But people don't print out paper anywhere near where they did. They don't scan it. It's all digital. Okay, so you can be anywhere. So now the heart of work is not in the office. It's in the cloud. And you have to start thinking that way. Okay. Yeah. So if you're a bright CEO or CFO, you got to be thinking about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how is this work going to be done? And what should we commit to? You're not going to sign a 15 or 20-year lease on anything. Okay.
That's done.
Because the rate of change is now exponential. And we haven't even talked about AI. And we're probably out of time to do that. But
there's never enough time for AI.
Never enough time for AI.
So Fran, can you do us a huge favor and tell us about a comical or inspiring moment you had while working remotely?
Sure. It won't be as good as the hooker story. But I will tell you, when I first started, and this is now in the last century, because I go back a long time. When I first had my business, right?
So what year? Yeah, give us the setting. Where are we at?
This was like 1994.
Oh shit! Okay. I'm pimping. I think I have a 6-pack. Well, not a 6-pack, but a 2-pack. At this point, I had a 2-pack, bro.
Yeah.
So anyway, I started this business as just me. I quit. I went. I started, opened up, and I'm sitting in the same room, actually in the same house, because we've been in the same house the whole time. It's a great house, but we have 2 small children now. My son would be about 2 or 3, and my daughter was 1. And we had the world's best nanny. We somehow found this woman who she was a grandmother type person, and she did a wonderful job with the kids. She did everything. She did the laundry, everything. But we really started to lose her after about 5 years. But so the kids would be in the downstairs with the nanny, who would be, entertaining them and feeding them and doing whatever you could do with kids, which is, a lot of fun stuff. So occasionally my son would kind of escape and call up the stairs and knock on the door, because the door would be closing. Daddy. So I remember this one time, there was a new client prospect. We were just about to do the deal with them. And of course, in that period, sounding like we weren't working in an office, you're working in a home. Who would want to deal with that guy?
Right.
He's not even in an office, right? And there's a big push for me to go to the office, figure out how to finance that. But anyway, the door knocked, and I explained that I unfortunately my son was downstairs.
So you're on a call because there's no video back then.
No, there's no video. This is the phone call, speakerphone, I think.
Yeah.
And so the client said, "Oh, nope, don't worry about it. It's not a problem." So he left, and then. Actually, about the next week at about the same time, somehow he did the same thing. And I'm on the phone with this same client. And I thought he was going to get really irritated, Yeah. And he said, no, bring him in. I want to talk to him, So I bring my son in. And he has this conversation. Damn, if he didn't sign the contract.
Your kid did you a solid.
Yeah.
What did they talk about? You remember what they were talking about?
What do you? It was fun stuff, and who are you? Are you working with my daddy? It was just it was a great memory.
That's precious.
But that's a long time ago. Today, now if you have a child that comes, you have to put them on the video.
But I mean, just thinking about '94, like the conference call, how intense it was. Like you had it in the middle of your thing, you just put it on speakerphone, and you were still remote.
Right.
You're still working remotely. Great story.
Yeah. We're going to be so much better in the future. You're going to have holograms. They're going to be great.
No.
You're not going to have cars. The car's going to pick you up with the right size car for wherever you're going. It's going to be such a wonderful world.
Yeah.
Hope I live there.
Really looking forward to that. So, Fran, where can our listeners and viewers find you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they can find me here in this room if they want to come over.
That's where you are. You're going to be where you're at.
Fran's address is... No, I'm just kidding.
There.
No, I'd say a couple places. You can go to LinkedIn. A lot of people watching are on LinkedIn. It's Fran-Saele, LinkedIn.com, IN, and then Fran-Saele. You just put in Fran or Francis Saele. I usually come up there. That's okay. Nice. We have a website, but we're redoing it. But you can come in and leave a message there. We should be up in about a month or so, maybe 2 months. Mortevita.com, Mortevita.com. And of course, there's email too. If someone wants to email me, they can do that. That's on the website, or it's on LinkedIn. You can get the email address.
Cool. Great. Well, we cannot thank you enough. What an episode.
Great time, Fran. Thank you so much.
I hope you don't get banned. But,
I don't think we'll get. Good point. Good point. We'll find out. We'll find out if it passes
Canceled.
the YouTube thing.
It's a good thing we didn't talk about O.J. Simpson. That's all I got to say.
That's a very good point. You are from Buffalo. We are from Buffalo. But thank you so much, man. So much knowledge in here. Really appreciate it, man. Come back anytime. So, we'll talk to you soon, man. Appreciate you.
It's a fun time. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Great to be with you for now.
Oh, likewise. Thank you. You've been listening to Remotely One. Visit us at remotelyone.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.